Hi, friend, and welcome back to Elaborations with Skellington Grin. I'm your host, Ava, your goth witch big sis, and today's episode is going to be one that I would like to call a truth serum episode. This episode might make you a little uncomfortable, it might make you whinge a little bit, it might make you cringe, but it's gonna do you some good. Because today we are talking about pseudo connection and the social media illusion of intimacy. So, yes, we are talking social media, connection, ghosting, and what it really means to show up in your truth with a capital T. So, let's start this episode with a little bit of an astrology moment because, one, I can't help myself. And if you've been listening to this podcast, or you've been following me on social media, haha, or you have listened to the Skellington Grin podcast that I used to do about 2 years ago, you know me by now. And you also know that on this podcast, we dive into astrology. We dive into talking about different spiritual concepts. We dive into talking about the nuances of spirituality and the human experience and how we can integrate those nuances to understand our own experiences. But let's get a little astrological here. I am a Scorpio stellium person. So what does this mean? If you have a stellium in your astrological natal chart, it means that you have more than one, or actually more than 3 placements of the same astrological sign in your birth chart. When you have a stellium, you have sometimes 6 placements in your birth chart of one astrological sign. Sometimes it's a little less than 6, but sometimes it's usually about 6. And for me, my sun sign, my moon sign, my Venus, Pluto, Jupiter, and North Node are all in Scorpio. So I was born to be a Scorpio, apparently. And add in a Taurus rising, a Mars in Leo, and a Mercury in Libra, and the translation is, I am wired for intensity, depth, shadows, and all of the mirror work that most people would rather avoid. And trust me, before I even went even deeper on my own spiritual journey, I was avoiding my own shadow work. Ruh-roh. But anyone who has worked with me can probably tell you this. They can attest to this. You know that I'm going to pull this work out of you if you work with me. And it isn't to be cruel or cunning or malicious or manipulative. It's more to get you to be really honest with yourself. Because if you can't be honest with yourself, how honest can you be in your life, even on social media? But the reason I bring this astrological layer into the conversation is to explain that I am a person who values actual presence. And that is going to help me to set the tone for the rest of the episode. Because since we're talking about social media has trained us to settle for what I like to call pseudo presence instead of real presence. And pseudo presence is pretty much that belief that because we have a presence on social media, because people can interact with us on Snapchat or Instagram or X or TikTok or Facebook, that they're connected to us and that we have presence and we are able to show up because we are always tuned in and turned on. But when we really dial it back and we take a step back from it, we realize that we're only skating on the surface when it comes to social media. And what happens when we prioritize those social media connections and that social media presence, we never allow ourselves to meet our depth, our actual self, our shadows. We push our shadows to the side in favor of a highlight reel that we can share on Instagram that looks pretty. We favor that Pinterest-worthy lifestyle. And we also never allow ourselves to connect with the real people who are going to bring out the depth in us. And look, I'm not saying that you can't follow your favorite celebrities on social media or actually find really good friends through social media. I have. I've connected with people through social media because they were friends of friends, and we added each other on Facebook back when I had Facebook. I'm no longer on there. But I have met so many wonderful people through social media, but they also lived in my general area and in my state, and I was able to actually formulate good, healthy friendships with them, and I am still friends with them to this day. But we've been likely programmed to think that having millions of followers on social media or 500 friends on Facebook is the ultimate testament to our success as a human being in the world of connection. But let me tell you something. It's not the ultimate testament, especially because social media allows us to connect with so many people all over the world. And it also allows us the chance to have what is called parasocial relationships with other people, and especially celebrities. We'll follow our favorite celebrities on Instagram and X and TikTok and Facebook and all of these other places that we can follow our favorite celebrities. And we'll think that because we're getting a highlight reel of how they go about their life, that we know who they are. Or we'll watch interviews and think that we know who they are. We only know so much of what they're allowing the world to see them as. And unless we were to be spending day in and day out with those favorite celebrities, we would not actually know who they actually are. Okay? But let's move on to this idea of truth with a capital T. There are, I should say, let me correct my grammar here. There are two types of truth in this world. Truth with a lowercase t and truth with an uppercase T. Why am I saying that there are two types of truth in this world? Stay with me. There is the truth that is just there. It is the average, everyday truth that we can find in scientific facts and the truth of our lived experiences. It is digestible, and it is the kind that makes you nod politely and move on because you're like, oh, yeah, I get it. Okay, cool, continue. Let me go on about my life. But truth with a capital T is wildly different because this is the truth that comes from your core, the truth of who you are, the truth of your vibrational resonancy at this moment. It comes from your higher self, from God, source, spirit, or whatever you want to call it. And it is in the balance of your shadow and light. And this truth is not meant to be digestible, because this truth is meant to slice through illusions, kind of like a scythe. And if you know me, just like with the astrology, I am a tarot reader, and I am a big proponent of using tarot symbology. Symbology? Look, we'll go with it. I don't know if that was the word that I wanted to use, but we'll go with it. But I like to use tarot symbolism to explain certain things. And if you've looked at the logo image, my logo image is a woman with half of a skull face holding a scythe with a corvid on her shoulder. And it's meant to invoke the Grim Reaper, because the card most associated with Scorpio in the tarot deck is the Death card. And death and truth and the breaking through of illusions is so uncomfortable, but it can also be very liberating. And we'll go into tarot and tarot symbolism in another episode, but let's move forward a little bit, because this idea of truth with a capital T came to me from one of my favorite creators. So I want to give a nod to her real quick. Lucy Lampy. Lucy is a self-proclaimed wild woman and a trauma-informed healing coach. And as far as I'm concerned, she's also a force to be reckoned with when it comes to feminine liberation and sexual reclamation. She does not play small, and therefore her work has inspired me for years. And she was the first person to turn me on to the idea of truth with a capital T from a podcast episode that I listened to about 2 months ago. And if you are serious about stepping into your truth, I highly recommend checking her out on Instagram, because she and her partner do all of these different things and all of these different like coaching and healing sessions where they help to heal the father wound and help to reclaim intimacy and so many different things. And it is absolutely phenomenal. And if you want something that's a little bit more self-paced and you're especially looking to connect to feminine energy, I highly recommend checking out her ebook, R.I.P. to the Good Girl, A Reclamation of the Dark Feminine. It is absolutely phenomenal. And you do not have to be female to connect with feminine energy. You can be male, you can be non-binary, but feminine energy is just mostly the energy of creativity, the energy of breaking through illusions, the energy of like really honoring your more nurturing side and your more emotional side and your more fluid side. So that's the best way that I can describe feminine energy. But when we are looking at dark feminine, it doesn't just mean those things that are necessarily bad. It just means working with and integrating your shadow. So I highly recommend checking out that book. You can get it on Amazon, I think, for $3.33. We love those angel numbers, okay? And I also have her podcast linked as a recommendation on Spotify for any Spotify listeners, so go check it out when you can. And Lucy, if you ever listen to my podcast episodes, thank you for being one of my biggest inspirations, and I love you with all of my heart. Now, let's connect all of this to universal law. And whether you pull from the law of attraction, vibration, assumption, or polarity, the message is the same. The universe mirrors you and people mirror you. And you don't attract what you want, you attract what you are. And if what you are is avoidant, unhealed, or hiding behind filters and highlight reels, that is exactly what will show up in your connections, both on social media and in your waking life. And it doesn't matter if you want something different, because your energy is always broadcasting what you are. And therefore, the people and experiences that match that will find you. Even through the algorithm that has been perfectly curated on social media. And when it comes to mirrors, social media is what I like to call the glitter mirror. It's shiny, it's addictive, it's hyper pretty and curated by that algorithm. But it is also as deep as a kiddie pool. And if you've ever been in a kiddie pool, you know it ain't that deep. That's kind of the point. But what social media does is it gives us this constant access to others without the messy, awkward, holy kind of intimacy that grows depth and integrates all of the different aspects of who we are. And let me tell you something that you probably didn't think you were ever going to hear. A like button is not a love language. It's not. And that also brings me to the point of ghosting. Ghosting is like emotional fast food. It's quick, salty, and numbing, but it's ultimately hollow. And social media allows us to ghost people even more than we used to. And I'll be honest, I have ghosted people before. I have left connections without saying goodbye for different reasons. Sometimes because of the circumstances of my life, and sometimes because certain people simply do not deserve that energy that it takes to explain yourself. Some people have needed that closure, some people do not, and it is rarely easy either way. I have also been on the receiving end, having people talk to me about leaving a connection or just vanishing without any explanation. And no matter how it happens, it is never easy. But the worst part about it is the avoidance. Because when we're avoiding the work of presence and communication, it leaves a hole that cannot be filled because you're always looking for that closure. You're always looking for that explanation. You're always wondering, what did I do wrong? And sometimes it's because we are so overwhelmed by the connectivity of social media that we never allow ourselves to really truly connect to people outside of our little mini computers in our pockets. But I want to really hone in on this too. The sacred work that we can do within our connections is allowing space for the connections themselves and for conflict. Because real connections have real conflicts. Not just the social media connections that we have where the conflict is, oh, well, you're on social media, but you're not responding to my message. Sometimes people are just going to be drained and they want to scroll a little bit because they're trying to bring up their dopamine, okay? But conflict is not the enemy. Conflict is actually intimacy in disguise. It is the doorway to growth and to emotional intelligence and to deeper trust. And if all of your connections are easy and filtered through social media, they will not evolve you because that avoidance isn't going to heal you. And real presence, the messy, awkward, and embodied kind, is where the magic really happens. And if you are listening to this right now and you are thinking, ooh, she's talking about me, you are right, but I am also talking about me too. Nobody likes to hear the straight up truth, but sometimes we all need the shot. So the next time you find yourself scrolling instead of calling, you find yourself ghosting instead of speaking, or you find yourself settling for pseudo connection instead of showing up fully, I want you to ask yourself, what truth am I avoiding? And what mirror am I refusing to look into? And as we close this episode, I want to leave you with this affirmation and the following prompts. The affirmation is, I choose truth even when it burns, even when it means I have to take a little social media detox. I choose to be in my truth. The journal prompt that I have for you is, where am I avoiding presence and what would it look like to show up fully? Where am I avoiding presence and what would it look like to show up fully? And this week's challenge is to replace one digital shortcut with a real connection. Whether that means that you are going to spend 24 hours off of social media so that you can go spend that 24 hours engaging with real, legitimate people, or you are taking that 24 hours to just be with yourself. Replace that one digital shortcut with a real connection. And as always, if you enjoyed this episode, I would love it if you subscribed to the podcast and shared it with friends. And if you want to stay connected and explore all of the other things that I offer, feel free to check the description for the link to my link tree where you will find all of my projects, my social media, yes, my social media, and more. And you can even share this podcast to your story on Instagram and tag me because I would love to see it. And I would love to know how this episode helped you to be more discerning about your social media usage. Until next time, stay true and remember, real connections, even the ones with me, won't happen and don't happen through a screen. They happen with real people in real time right here. I'll see you next time. This has been Elaborations with Skellington Grin. Bye.